Look at those barrels, 4 of them lined up in a row. The organ gun is here to blast away your woes and your worries, at least if you're a Dawi. Today we've got Big Pun up against Beastman, and he's got Ungrim Iron Fist, Felix, and a Runesmith for a leadership core. We've got Rangers here, Miners with blasting charges, some Dwarf Warriors, Regiment of Renown, no, not the Regiment of Renown, just regular old Ironbreakers, and a Bomber currently running for its life from these Harpies. We've got Bestigor Herd as well, some Ungor Raiders, Ungor Herds, Gore Herds. Actually, no Gore Herds, but yeah, some more Razorgors there in the back. Morgar the Shadowgave, of course, for the Beastmen. So, good stuff. Let's see how it goes. I believe there's Lore of Beasts there as well for some Manticore summons. You can see already, speaking of Lore of Beasts, that Beastcaster is getting focused pretty significantly by these organ guns, and they're a multi-shot type artillery. There's a few of these in the game. Probably the most comparable is the Hellblaster Volley Gun, but in practice, the Dawi organ gun seems to be a lot better, at least. For the Dawi, it's very good at doing a number of things. We'll kind of talk more about that as the battle goes on right now. Helping to focus down that Beastcaster. He did get the one Cygor summon off, but you can see between the Bomber and the organ gun there, it just absolutely annihilates that poor Beast Ray Shaman there. Likewise, Morgar's having a little bit of a rough time against Ungrim Iron Fist. He definitely does not want to take that fight. Ungrim went from being one of the worst characters in the game. Well, I don't think he was actually that terrible. He was pretty bad, but he's very, very good now as these pigs get blasted. Big Pun doing a good job protecting these organ guns. We've seen this before, the kind of elite infantry protecting your artillery. And yeah, the Ironbreakers definitely can make their presence felt at a range. Now going to see some Centaurs with Great Ones kind of folding in here as well. They're not going to beat Ironbreakers in combat, but they will be able to potentially shut down at least one of those organ guns. This other one, though, firing now into this big blob. And basically, these things do an insane amount of damage firing into big blobs like this. Like, it might seem like on paper that it's not that much damage, more damage than a cannon, but in fact, it is really nice because it's concentrated, but at the same time slightly dispersed, and it is just a lot of damage for the organ guns here. You can see already 42 kills there, 47 kills there, some XP chevrons going on. But the fact they're going to be here more or less just free to continue firing, we'll kind of keep them in the background. Vestigor still grinding up through this main pocket here. They are way over blobbed though, to be honest, and in just a minute we're going to see these organ guns kind of switch over onto this big blob of Vestigor. They really need to be pushing through and getting on those Rangers. But yeah, the Ironbreakers doing their job protecting the organ guns. Despite the Centaurs nearby, the organ guns are still mostly able to operate here. Some of the crews being interrupted, but a couple of them able to keep fighting. Dawi sticking to their guns. Oh man, they're super cool too in terms of their animations and their look. Probably one of the coolest looking artillery pieces in the game. I'm a fan of gunpowder units in general, and those multi-shot ones especially. Very, very cool looking. But yeah, as we kind of take an overarching look here, you'll see the Dwarf Heroes definitely making their presence felt. The organ guns kind of switching between the Raiders. Now we'll kind of watch the effect on infantry. The organ guns definitely, in my mind, their most ideal targets are kind of loose formation infantry, or any infantry, to be honest, whether it's densely packed or loose, but especially something like a Waywatcher, for example, right? Or any kind of loose formation infantry, because the cannonballs are only concentrated in one spot, right? There's only one projectile, whereas the organ gun can kind of spread its shots over a unit. And so whether that be cavalry or infantry, especially, like I said, multi-model, like loose formation infantry, like you know, Deepwood Scouts, Waywatchers, Chameleon Skinks, stuff like that, does enough missile damage that they'll just one-shot their unit models for something like Chameleon Skinks. And yeah, the spread kind of scatter shot does a much better job at taking out those loose formation units than a typical cannon would. And just not to mention, of course, the damage is absolutely beautiful. Right now, we've still got the one online. Now going to be shut down potentially by some Ungors, although we do have the Ironbreakers still sticking to the guns. Their duty is to protect this position. They will hold as best they can. We'll see. Did they actually save the crew there? It looks like they did. The crew is still operational, but here come the Harpies, swooping down from the air. Going to be attacking the crew as well. Looks like they are no longer mounted to the artillery pieces. No? Maybe they still are, which is honestly quite impressive. Trying to take some pot shots at Morgur. He, of course, has heavy missile resistance, so this is maybe not the best. Like, if I were in the Dwarf player's position here, I would probably switch these onto these Centaurs with great weapons are probably the most priority target right now. Morgur is a priority target, but you can definitely kill him with these melee units. And like getting at the cavalry potentially is going to be more valuable, but we'll see. Or going after these Ungor Raiders. He doesn't have visibility on most of them, but yeah, you can see as more of them start to come in range here, these Dwarf Warriors get eaten up. We've got some Rangers over there getting eaten up by Harpies. Handful of Dwarf Warriors right here, so definitely very tattered. Dawi forces are vastly outnumbered here. More than 2 to 1 at this point. But of course, they've got Ungrim and Felix, both of which are incredibly powerful foot combat lords. It just so happens there's a bunch of armor-piercing infantry here, so Felix anti-infantry specifically will be quite good. But yeah, like I said, this, in my opinion, this is a little bit of a mistargeting from the Dwarf player. They're going to get some value shooting at Morgur, but yeah, the best Gore would be good targets. The Centaurs with great opens would be good targets. The Ungor Raiders are doing what they should have probably done a long time ago, which is to shoot the organ gun crew to death, basically. Dawi artillery crews are some of the few units that don't have high armor. But you can shoot them with non-armor piercing missiles and net tons of value that way if you can get close enough, which the Raiders now do. So it's going to be a little bit of a grind in this late game. Dawi are forming up their defensive kind of death ball. Vestigor are going to come in now, get a nice charge. Charge bonus will definitely help in this situation, but it's the characters that are an issue, right? And Morgur really can't stand against these two. It's interesting that the Beastmen don't have... Their just lack of characters in general really bites them in a situation like this. A lot of factions could take like a cheap generic melee hero, whether that be, you know, Empire Captain, a Bob, whatever. Just kind of cheap generic foot heroes to help even out this fight so Morgur's not so alone. In this situation, you don't have, you know, you have a Gorbel, who's kind of a monstrous infantry character, counts as large, which is not going to help against somebody like Ungrim or Gotrek. You don't have, like, a generic, I don't know, Gore melee hero, or whatever it is. I guess the Wargore, I think it's called. It just would be so nice to have a generic melee hero for the Beastmen. This is definitely a situation where you would want that. Maybe 1 or 2. I guess you had the caster, so only 1 extra. Or, like, if they made Malagor actually good, then potentially, you know, you take a couple along with Malagor to kind of act as a foot hero squad. In Malagor, I'm very much going on a tangent at this point, but let's just go for it. Malagor is really, if you compare him to Draika, he's actually, like, kind of interesting. He's not that far off, probably, from where he should be. His abilities are just so terrible. Like, he really needs, like, an AoE immune to psychology on his leadership ability, and then that negative leadership ability, in my opinion, should also make him cause terror, maybe on a big power spike, and have it be like a -24 leadership in an AoE or something. His item, what is it? That ability, something wicked this way comes. I want to say it's his item that's the leadership buff. I don't remember. We'll have to look at that another time. But yeah, at this point, the Dawi heroes are just kind of holding out. These Ironbreakers also holding out against the Vestigor. Going to get cycle charged quite a bit by these Centaurs with great weapons, but This is the end of days right here. Ungrim gets a big ol' attack on Morgur the Shadowgave. He is getting lit up pretty bad by the Ungor Raiders, which credit to their accuracy. Even though they are Ungors, they're still making pretty good contact with him. Felix is going to get back in range, though, and try and keep up his regeneration. The Beastmen player doing what they should at this point, which is to not engage these guys in melee. Not to give Felix any more regeneration, but it looks like one of the Ungor Raiders actually not following that 100%, probably just on a grouped order or something, but we'll fast forward a little bit as this grind ensues. You already know probably what's going to happen. There's not really a lot that can challenge Ungrim and Felix at this point very decisively. A little bit, yeah, maybe should have played off the Ungor Raiders a little bit more as he was doing what he should have, but then started to commit a little bit to some melee engagements there. Not super exciting to kite Gotrek and Felix with a bunch of Ungor Raiders. But there you go with army losses. Dwarfs take home a victory. So yeah, Organ Guns kind of got killed off in the sort of third quarter, if you will, there. Still, definitely got their damage value, which is what you're looking for. One of them even doubling up on their damage value, and if you can keep these guys protected, they will absolutely pay for themselves in dividends. Probably one of the better artillery pieces in the game, just kind of in general, for sort of shooting different targets. It's not amazing for shooting single entities in my experience, but expensive infantry and cavalry especially are very, very vulnerable targets. The gyro bomber didn't quite pay for itself in terms of damage value. I don't know if he got the bombs off. I didn't really see there, but helping to take out that caster was quite nice. Obviously, Ungrim, an absolute powerhouse. Felix doing some pretty good damage too. Miners with their charges will get pretty good damage usually. Dwarf warriors are decently cost effective in one case at least. The Ironbreakers though, man, those charges on the pigs that were coming in, the pigs and the Centaurs with great weapons both got hit pretty hard by the Ironbreaker charges there. Rangers, one of them did pay for themselves. In terms of the Beastmen here, Morgar, decent job. I mean, plus the spawn summons, of course, definitely paid for himself. The Ungors, I'm not really much of a fan of Ungors at all, except for the Spears and Raiders. Like, the basic hand weapon Ungors, I think, are actually pretty terrible, which is why I would rate, like, Empire State Troops as a whole better, because, you know, swordsmen are way better than these guys. Anyway, that's another tangent. Bestigor did pretty much pay for themselves. They're decent in this matchup. You want to try and cycle charge them if you can, and the Beastman player here, again, no disrespect, but just a little over blobbed right there with them. Could have spread them out a little bit more and maybe swept some more units. Ungor Raiders, though, absolutely awesome units. Even in a matchup where you'd think, okay, they don't have good AP values, it even says, I think, in their tooltip, like, poor against armor, which is just not true because they have so many models. They're still effective against armor. And in this matchup, there's usually plenty of low armor targets to shoot at, whether that be, like I said, artillery crews or slayers. Yeah, Centaurs with great weapons, awesome in this matchup, though. I talked about them recently, and I would definitely say this is a matchup where they can shine. RPs also, if they get the right engagement, definitely can shine. Pig's kind of the same thing. They had a little bit of a rough outing this time, but they are decently cost-effective in general. Let's just quickly finish up here, though, with the Organ Gun. And like I said, the only really kind of direct comparison artillery piece in my mind is something like the Empire Hellblaster Volley Gun, which on paper it seems like should be a lot better because it has higher missile damage, but in practice, I think the Organ Gun is more accurate, right? Because you're spreading its shots between you're spreading its damage, sorry, between 4 shots rather than this thing, which is spreading, you know, on paper, again, more damage, but it is spread between 9 shots, and it has lower range, generally worse accuracy, especially at the farther end of that range. You know, in practice, I just feel like even though it's 50 points more expensive, the Organ Gun just better overall. The crew also just more capable. 20 melee defense on the crew is actually not too bad. All things considered, 28 weapon strength too. These guys are ready to go. Defend their artillery piece here. Yeah, and like I said, on paper it says it does way less missile damage, but in practice I feel like it's pretty decent. And these shots, you see how it's like 57 armor piercing damage? So just the way that the health per model distribution works in this game, as an example, we'll bring it back to Empire here. Cavalry units tend to have about 100 health, give or take, per model, sometimes more. Like Reichsguard, you can see if you divide that 5,000 by HP by 45 models, you get more than 100 health per model, something like 110 or something. I don't know, just estimating. But so the missile damage on the Hellblaster Volley Gun is low enough that it's not going to one-shot unit models, right? 57 missile damage on a single shot's not likely to one-shot unit model. I don't know, maybe there's some infantry units that have that low of HP per model, but I'd have to double check. Whereas with the Organ Gun, you can see it's 68 armor-piercing damage, right? So still well below that 100, you know, mark that you would expect for a lot of cavalry units, but a lot of infantry units you can see here, like even just looking at the Dawi infantry, who are pretty healthy in terms of infantry, like 6,000 HP, a little less than 6,000 HP, so they have less than 100 health per model, right? You can just kind of guesstimate that pretty easily. And these at 68 armor piercing damage, you could see maybe if they don't get a good armor roll, again, I'd have to do the math specifically and kind of break things down. You could potentially one-shot unit models with the Organ Guns, right? And that's kind of the advantage. Like I talked a little bit about Lizardmen units and, sorry, loose formation units. And Lizardmen, of course, have these Chameleon Skinks here, who Yeah, pretty low HP per model, honestly, if you kind of divide it up. And even though they do have good missile resistance, right, 40% missile resistance, this thing still probably, if you add both of these together, because again, they don't have very high armor, so you'll get most of that base missile damage as well. Like, they're still likely to one-shot the unit models of Chameleon Skinks. Like, I want to say it's almost guaranteed, even with the missile resistance factored in. Again, I'd have to kind of sit down with a calculator and do the whole equations and everything to really figure it out, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. And that's kind of the advantage of the organ guns. It sits in a sweet spot in terms of the multi-shot artillery, where it's not too many shots, it's not spreading its damage over too many models. It will still one-shot models, but it has multiple shots, so it can actually, you know, spread that out over a loose formation unit. So hopefully that all makes sense. A little bit of a sort of technical episode in terms of how the organ guns are better than other artillery, because on paper you might not look at it like, it's only 300 range, like, why are they more expensive than the cannons? Like, yes, they technically deal more damage, but, you know, less ammo as well, and all that other jazz. Now, hopefully you kind of understand how that all works. So, you enjoyed this episode, give it a like, share it if you found it useful. Sure appreciate you guys watching, so thank you very much. Subscribe for more, hit that bell notification, and we'll see you next time.